Since Donald Trump returned to power, Europe is worried it can no longer depend on the U.S. as a reliable ally. The Baltic countries in particular are concerned about being left on their own, especially given the signs that Russia is already using underhand methods to attack. Moscow is suspected of being behind several acts of sabotage in recent months. DW's Juri Rescheto went on patrol in the Gulf of Finland with an Estonian warship to find out more.
This oil tanker, discovered by the Estonian patrol ship Sakala in the middle of the Gulf of Finland. The tanker turns out to be a Russian ship. The Sakala approaches the vessel looking for any suspicious activity. A ship is considered suspicious if it suddenly slows down, makes a sudden turn, or refuses to communicate with the patrol craft. Checks like these are now routine for the Sakala's crew.
So the task of my ship is to patrol a dedicated area, monitor all traffic that is going through here, to make sure that nothing suspicious or nothing bad will be done in this area.
The Sakala with the registration M314 is actually a mine hunter. Its mission is to locate and neutralize sea mines in times of war. The Sakala is currently on a different mission, along with other NATO ships in the Baltic Sea.
Yesterday we saw something hanging from an anchor chain from one cargo vessel. So we went closer, we contacted the vessel, and we checked. Actually, it wasn't anything else, but it was just a fire hose tangled in the anchor chain.
With a crew of 38, the Sakala is one of 3 Estonian Navy vessels currently patrolling the Gulf of Finland, a part of the Baltic Sea that is around 80 kilometers wide. The fact that a mine-hunting vessel is on patrol in the Baltic Sea shows how seriously Estonia takes several suspicious incidents in these waters in recent months.
Increased vigilance is the order of the day here in the Gulf of Finland. After a series of suspected acts of sabotage in the Baltic Sea, there are going to be more patrols on ships like this one.
Oil tankers from the so-called Russian Shadow Fleet are allegedly behind the sabotage campaign, including suspected attacks on undersea communications cables. Moscow is accused of using them as a weapon in hybrid warfare against the West. Most of the tankers reportedly are old, often with an obscure ownership structure, in order to circumvent Western sanctions. The increased patrols in the Baltic Sea are also intended to provide more security for the population on land, especially now when many people in Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania are increasingly concerned that the Russians could soon attack one of their countries as a test of NATO solidarity.
They're putting us all on trial.
It's very unsafe.
They've always been dangerous. If they break up Ukraine, they'll come here next.
Back in the Baltic Sea, the Sakala takes part in an exercise with a Finnish warship. Finland has been a member of NATO since 2023. With this exercise and the patrols, NATO wants to show a more robust presence, strengthening its deterrence against Russia.
For more on this, I'm joined by Janis Sarts. He is director of NATO's Strategic Communications Center of Excellence. That's a military organization that provides analysis and advice to the alliance and its member states. Welcome, sir. I want to set the table here just for a moment. What specific acts of sabotage are Western countries worried about, and what is the effect of the kind of damage that they could cause?
Well, so far the public knowledge is about the acts of defacement of the monuments, setting buildings on fire. Then the questions remain about the cables on sea, as well as a number of other activities that have been found out and made public. I think the key thing is to make us be fearful, not to understand what will happen next, and keep us on edge. I think that these are the key reasons.
As far as you know, how many suspected acts of Russian sabotage were in fact prevented by NATO patrols in the Gulf of Finland or in the wider Baltic Sea?
I'm not sure we have such a number, but certainly we see, since the increased NATO activity in the Baltic Sea, as well as the activity of the Allied member navies, the number of incidents that we had in the Baltic Sea has decreased.
So walk us through a scenario. If a NATO patrol notices a ship in a possible act of sabotage, what specific options does it have to intervene?
It depends, of course, where is that. Is it the territorial waters of one of the allies? Then there is one specific scenario. Then on the international waters, there's more limited options. But clearly, the knowledge and ability to be quickly responding, even in the international waters, makes it really important that we send a message to Russia that these kind of actions would not go unnoticed or unresponded to.
Do you feel that those NATO ships have essentially the power that they need to prevent these kinds of sabotages from taking place to the full extent? Do NATO patrols need more powers to act against suspected threats?
I think we are a group of alliance of democratic nations. So one of the key principles is rule of law. And in that sense, we also have to follow international law related to the shipping in the international waters, and we have to keep within these. But of course, there are ways and measures how we can, within these rules and principles, increase the safety of the Baltic Sea. So, of course, there are limitations, but we're finding ways how to make it effective.
How well informed are NATO patrols about which ships in the Baltic Sea are part of the Russian shadow fleet, where they are going and what they're carrying?
Well, of course, the information is available. There are, as always in these areas, there are information that sometimes you're not sure what is exactly taking place, but the intelligence sharing and other elements of the operation are in place to do as good operation as possibly we could as NATO. And as I say, I think the indication that there is a change of the number of incidents across last months in the Baltic Sea shows that there is a result.
Western governments say Russia transports the majority of its oil exports with its shadow fleet, thereby avoiding sanctions and financing its war against Ukraine. Why is it not possible to completely shut down this shadow fleet and thus Russia's most important source of income?
Well, as we know, there's one thing that Russia excels us as circumventing any kind of control systems. That said, of course, every time there is a new measure set to limit the Russian options to circumvent sanctions, Russia finds after some time the response to it. So it's always a constant back and forth game, and clearly there are intermediaries in the system that benefit, but we're kind of as an alliance and as a group of nations, we're I think constantly in battle for the better outcome.
Janis Sarts, Director of NATO's Strategic Communications Center of Excellence, our thanks to you.
Thank you.
What happens if US soldiers withdraw from Europe, especially from the Baltic countries? And just how safe are those Baltic states given that they all neighbor Russia?
I asked the President of Estonia this and more here in his office in Tallinn. Alar Karis, President of Estonia, thank you for taking the time for DW. Let's start with the impact of Donald Trump's second presidency. What did you think when it became clear that he would win the US election again?
That's a choice of American people. That was my first impression. And of course, I have seen President Trump also in the first presidency. So, of course, second presidency is always different. So we didn't know what to expect. And now it's more than 60 days being a president, and so many things have happened. And we also get some mixed feelings and also mixed ideas coming from our side of the Atlantic Ocean.
Mixed feelings in what way?
I mean, because things happen very fast, and that's probably a main issue also here in Europe and in Estonia. But so many things are happening at the same time, and you wake up in the morning and there's another news, and you start thinking whether it's comparable with the news what was yesterday, and so forth. So, but I always said we should stay calm and keep our eyes open and make sure that anything is going to happen above our heads.
Since regaining independence from the Soviet Union in the 1990s, Estonia has done everything in its power to move away from Russia and to move closer to the West. You have become a member of the EU and NATO. Now Donald Trump is talking positively about Russia and wants to change NATO's role in Europe. What do you think about this?
To be honest, I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, it's also important for US to stay in Europe. And again, I mean, some saying what they say from our side of Atlantic is that they are going to move away from certain regions from Europe. At the same time, President Trump said that also we are going to move from Germany to eastern part of Europe. So. But nothing really had happened, and I guess NATO will stay here in Europe. And from European perspective, it's also important it's important alliance, and we should, of course, put more resources on defense. But still, I think we are not able to build up our own defense system in Europe. So it's in collaboration, in alliance with NATO.
But there are reports that US wants to pull its soldiers out of the Baltic countries. Aren't you afraid about your security here in Estonia?
Well, we are not afraid. We are not afraid of anything. But of course, we should talk to NATO. Have been talking also to NATO officials here in Europe. So they don't see that NATO is going to pull out from Europe. So as I said, it's also important to NATO. Of course, what we should do to put more resources on NATO, because most of the money comes from US, and that's obviously not acceptable for American people.
Okay, we're talking about the plans or ideas, but the fact is that Donald Trump already has stopped military aid to Ukraine. How do you feel about this?
It's not good for Ukraine, obviously. It's not only stopping this military aid, but also it's for the morale of Ukrainian people. That's why it's important that Europe will continue to support Ukraine as much as possible.
How about the morale of the Estonian people?
Of course, as I said, we keep our eyes open, and because Estonia is putting more than 3% on defense, and we are planning to increase this percentage. Although this percentage is not that important as what we are going to do with this with these resources, and this 5% comes from actually NATO defense plans. It's not only, and we started to discuss this already last year, and after National Security Council we had here in this building, I proposed that we should put 5% on defense. So it's not that we got some signal from other side of Atlantic Ocean.
I would like to talk about these 5% a little bit later, but also there are reports that the US administration wants to restrict even NATO's Article 5 on collective security. What would that mean for Estonia's security, if that would happen?
First of all, we should do everything not to test this Article 5. That means we have to build up our defense and so forth. But then again, I'm not convinced that this is going to happen, because once when US went to Afghanistan, we went together. That means it's not true that US is afraid that when they need Article 5, nobody is going to follow them. So that is an experience already from the past. So Estonia, not only Estonia, more than 40 different countries aligned with US.
You mentioned it, we wake up every morning and see what's happening in the US, what headline is coming next. Can you rely at all on the US?
There is no other alternative. That means it's important to mend our relations. First of all, mend relations between Ukraine and US and Zelensky and President Trump, and also Europe and US, because it's important, and we are strong enough, and we are even stronger together. If you look at the map of the world at the moment, it's important to collaborate and do things together, because otherwise it's not that nice if you think about the future.
Can you rely on NATO?
Yes, of course.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about those 5% you proposed to spend. 5% of GDP on defense instead of the required 2%, that would mean a record within NATO. Do you think it would make Estonia safer, these 5% of GDP?
What we do, we just give an example to other nations, because for a small country, 5% is still a very small amount of money. But, and I think Europe is thinking already about 3%, although I know that there are countries who put less than 2% even to defense. But I guess Europe understands it's important to put more resources on defense, and we already see it. And also in Germany, probably things are going to change as far as if you listen your new chancellor. So things are going to happen also in Germany.
Mr. President, your neighbor spending on defense and security, Russia, is expected to make up 40% of the total budget. Are 2 or 5, even 5%, enough in relation to these 40% of the total budget in Russia for military?
I always give this example because before the Second World War, we spent a lot, more than 20% on defense. But the problem at the time was we didn't have friends, allies. Now we are in a different situation. That's why NATO is extremely important for us, and also other friendly countries. That means you have to put certain amount of resources on defense, as well you need allies to defend yourself. So as you see, quite recently Finland and Sweden, they joined also NATO. Although Finland has been military very well equipped, but they did realize it's important to be a member of a defense alliance called NATO.
5% more for tanks and guns means 5% less for social benefits and I don't know, medical care and so on.
I just talked today with Prime Minister, and we are going to have a plan in coming 2 weeks. But of course, most importantly, I guess they are taking, first of all, they divided. It's not going to happen next year, 5%. Divided over years. And secondly, it's probably taking a loan as well. So it's not, if Estonia can manage to put at this very moment 3% or 3.4%, I mean, it's also for bigger countries, it shouldn't be an obstacle.
Could you understand people who are concerned about having less money in their pocket and because of these more 5% for guns and tanks?
I mean, Estonian people understand that it's important to put money on defense. But of course, it's also important to show where this money goes to. That means to show that it goes to to defense rather than somewhere else. And I do trust our generals who know exactly what we do need. Because if you put more money you get, there is a temptation to to buy more fancy things, and these fancy things are available at the moment, not probably military equipment but to actually need in long run.
But Estonian economy is not doing very well at the moment.
It's getting better.
I hope so for you. What do you think Estonians are willing to give up for their security? Estonian people.
It's a difficult question. I mean, nobody wants to give up anything, but at these difficult times, it's probably need to think what not to do rather than what to do. And it depends on the solutions provided by our government. But at this moment, if you even look at the polls, Estonian people are willing to defend. More than 80% of our population are ready to defend the country, which is a rather high number, together with Finland, actually. In other countries in Europe, the numbers are much, much lower. And that means they also agree to put more resources on defense.
And sacrifice their lives?
I mean, during the war, I mean, we should avoid the war. But if you agree to defend the country, that means you agree also to sacrifice lives.
Would you be in favor of European soldiers being deployed on the border between Russia and Ukraine as a potential part of the peace deal?
I mean in Ukraine, a number of countries already have decided, because Ukraine needs certain security when this ceasefire or peace agreements are settled. Denmark recently and some other countries. We have the same discussion back home, but we haven't decided whether to send or not. But Ukraine needs security after the peace agreement.
So you can't say whether you will be willing to send Estonian soldiers to Ukraine?
Not decided yet, but these discussions are there.
The EU is extremely slow and bureaucratic. Would you like to see more decisiveness, determination from the EU when the EU is clearly supposed to take the leadership role in these difficult times?
Yeah, of course, because we are 27 members. It makes it difficult. But we have agreed in a number of times and difficult times, also during the COVID. We managed to find an agreement, and probably now it's the same thing. But we should sit down and not discuss, but to decide, and it's important. Of course, there are disagreements always. Some countries are not happy. Some countries are less happy, but we have to find a solution, because otherwise, as you said, we are just too slow. But we can't, how to say it, how should I put it, to abandon democracy, because autocratic countries, they are very decisive and they move very fast. So we have to find a balance.
Back to Estonia. Let's talk about your internal security. Around 22% of the Estonian population are ethnic Russians. Does that pose a security threat for your country?
Ethnic Russians, this population is rather mixed here. There are ethnic Russians with Estonian passport, with a so-called grey passport, and also Russian citizen. So it's a very mixed, and even within these subpopulations, feelings are also different. So at this very moment, we don't see this as a security threat, because even more than 50% of these ethnic Russians agreed to defend Estonia. So we monitor all the time and try to help them to integrate to Estonian society.
Let's talk about the future. The polarization of the world seems to be growing. How united is, from your point of view, Estonian society in the face of what may soon be a new world order?
It's very difficult to predict the future, but how should I put it? It's based on rule of law, and that we have this world and that United Nations should do the job much, much better. So rules-based world is our basis. Of course, I understand there are already movements in different directions, but this is what we've got.
We talked a lot about Donald Trump. Let's talk, or ask a question about Vladimir Putin. There are politicians in Estonia who are openly on Putin's side, and that despite the fact that many Estonians might remember the Soviet Union, the occupation. Considering this history, how could you explain why Putin has support in Estonia?
It probably depends on the generation. I don't know any politician who is pro-Putin. Maybe my circle is too small, but anyway, I don't see any politician who is pro-Putin. But of course, there are older generation who have the same nostalgia like East Germans towards Russia, and we didn't have much, or we basically didn't have anything, but we are more equal, and people kind of think that it was a good time, which was actually was not true. So, but this is a minority in Estonian society, and as I said, especially older generation who watch Russian TV and get this propaganda much easily.
With things changing in the United States, the world order, do you see any changes in the society here in Estonia?
I haven't noticed any changes at this very moment. These things don't influence that fast. I mean, you need something else apart from change of a president in the United States.
But I've heard some cases people are buying properties in Italy,
in Spain,
Portugal, Spain,
yes,
in the south, and leaving Estonia. Do you understand what is motivating these people?
Of course, some people are a bit more afraid than others, so they tend to find some more secure place in Europe. But at the same time, you have to realize the whole Europe is next to Russia. So we all border Russia. So it's not only Estonia, Finland, and some other countries. It's a whole Europe. So if something is going to happen, I hope not, so the whole Europe is in trouble. So property in Spain or Italy doesn't help much.
Can you imagine to have good relationships one day with Russia?
Russia remains next to our border and has been there for centuries. We know what to expect, but of course, a neighbor is a neighbor. It doesn't mean always that the neighbor is a friend. We have a lot of friendly neighbors, Finland, Latvia, Germany, and others. So there are regions in the world where some countries are surrounded by unfriendly neighbors. So we are, in that sense, we are lucky, and we know at this very moment who is our enemy. So let's hope that Russia is going to change, but history doesn't give much hope, to be honest.
Alar Karis, President of Estonia. Mr. President, thank you for this interview.
It's my pleasure.